Good evening. Welcome back to Wednesday teaching on experiencing the Buddhist teaching. And we are on the module of the good heart, where we are looking at the cultivation of loving kindness and compassion and the altruistic motivation called bodhicitta. Good evening, Craig. Bodhicitta, or sometimes translated as the mind of enlightenment, mind of awakening, is the attitude of aspiring to achieve a state of enlightenment in order to be of benefit to all sentient beings. So I'm going through two main methods for cultivating such an altruistic motivation. So we started last week with the method called the sevenfold cause and effect method. And what I've been explaining last week is how to approach this method, not so much sequentially following the traditional presentation, which I will go through today, but to approach it a little bit differently, from starting from where we now are at this moment, at our current level of loving kindness, our current level of compassion, and how do we start from where we are and go forward from there on. So I've been presenting some of the points from this particular perspective, starting from coming back, returning our attention to access our loving kindness and compassion, and to encourage it to come forth, to express it in our life, to nurture what we already have. That we all have kindness and compassion. We all have received the care, concern, the kindness of others as well. Of course, it varies in amount, in form, and circumstances, but it's important to have this kind of confidence and to be able to touch our own source of loving kindness and compassion that we all have. It may not be fantastic. It's not some incredible amount, but no matter how small it is, we do have it, and that is where we start from. We try to get in touch with it. We try to encourage it to come forth. We try to express it towards ourselves. Very important not to forget about ourselves, to extend kindness and compassion to ourselves, and also to be able to express that to those people closest to us, our families, our friends, people that we love, that we care about. And that is the basis that we start off from. As I said, charity begins from home. It's important not to overstretch ourselves, not too early, and strive for the welfare of all sentient beings, while at the same time still struggling with a lot of self-hatred, a lot of carrying with us a lot of all the negative feelings, maybe towards self or towards others. It's good to do some housekeeping and start where we are, and so that we can progressively, bit by bit, extend the scope of our kindness and compassion. So starting from loving kindness and compassion that we now have, I explained that we can look back on the conditions that nurture kindness, nurture compassion, the conditions that makes it easier for us to respond with loving kindness and compassion. What are the conditions? So I mentioned last week, I started talking about the first condition is this sense of relatedness. If I can relate to this person, if I feel that I'm closely related to this person, this is a very important condition, then it is so much easier for me. In fact, there is a high chance that I will actually naturally feel love and compassion towards this person. I will be able to respond with love and compassion. Because why? Because this person is closely related to me. It's closely connected to me. It's not as if the person is disconnected, unconnected, unrelated, some alien, some outsider. No, this person is very closely related to me, is of great concern to me. So that sense of relatedness is a very important precondition for us to naturally express kindness and compassion. Yeah. And building on this condition of relatedness, we also, as we can observe and we can recollect in our experience, we also tend to, for someone that is closely related to us, we have a lot of to and fro, a lot of interactions, And of course, we highlight in this occasion the positive interaction, the showing of care and concern, and the receiving of others' care and concern, the extending of our kindness through kind acts towards others, and we ourselves are also the recipients of others' love and kindness and care and concern. And likewise, with suffering, we naturally feel compassion and we express that compassion. As we try to care for someone, we try to help them, try to, lessen their suffering. Likewise, we ourselves are also the recipient of others' compassion. That when we are in trouble, that we are in pain, others are there for us, to support us, to do what they can to lessen our suffering, to keep us company as we go through hard times. So this to and fro, what I call reciprocal interaction, really bond us to one another, on the basis of feeling related and recognizing how closely we are. The more of this interaction, positive interaction, the closer we feel. To the extent that it is, this very natural thing for us to bring forth loving kindness and compassion. We don't even need to deliberate on it. We don't even need to sort of reflect and sort of psych ourselves up to be ready to be kind. We just kind and we just be compassionate. Why? Because the preconditions are already there. The preconditions that allow us to have this strong, affectionate bond to one another. So the conditions are relatedness, and on top of that, the conditions of reciprocal interaction, the giving and taking out of kindness, out of love and compassion. Right? So I hope this makes some sense, and it's not like I'm talking about some alien language. And I think it's very important to recognize how all these conditions feed into one another and how they mutually support one another. And this holds the key for us, even at our level, to enhance loving kindness and compassion. So towards someone, to be able to feel love and compassion, is it possible for me to find a way to relate to this person, to see this person as not so different from me, so different, so other than me, and therefore not as an alien, as an outsider, as something foreign, and maybe threatening, and that is we are unfamiliar with, that we are unsure, that is unknown, which is usually we are a little bit careful, we guard ourselves. Instead, if I can somehow find a way to relate to this person, see this person as very relatable, there's so many things that we share in common that they almost make this person as belonging to my camp, belonging to my side, then the rest of it will come quite naturally and quite easily. Right? And I suggest one idea. This idea I use for all sorts of occasions, and this idea which the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, often talk about is pointing us to recognize the innate desire, just very natural wish that we all have. All sentiments have this natural wish, wishing to find happiness for oneself, to be happy, and also strongly wishing not to suffer. To be happy and to not suffer is almost like one of the more primal desire instincts that all of us sentient beings possess, and manifest in our behavior, in our choices, in the case of human beings, in our thoughts, in our daydreams, in our fantasies. And it's so fundamental And it is a sort of a commonality that we share with all sentient beings. And of course, we can start with that we share with other human beings. And we can focus on this one single point and to see whether we can relate to others on the basis of this point. That maybe I and that person are very, very different background, different, everything else is different. But nonetheless, I know if I were to pause and think about it, this person is very similar or the same as I am on this point. That he or she wants to be happy, trying hard to be happy, and doesn't want to suffer. We may define happiness differently. We may define suffering differently. We may vary very greatly in the means, how we go about achieving those goals. But what I cannot deny is, and I can recognize it, I can see that we are all trying our best to fulfill this very natural wish to be happy and not suffer. And sometimes in a certain condition, under certain conditions, if I would think in that way, I find that, oh, no, this person is not so alien, not so different from me, from this point of view. And I can almost understand, even though I might disagree strongly, I can almost understand why they choose to do that or not this, why they behave in this way, why they make such choices, so to speak, based on how they view things and how they, and therefore how they go about pursuing their happiness and avoiding suffering. Right. So let's look at the other end of it. So now that we understand the preconditions, the sense of relatedness, the reciprocal interactions that really bond us, bring us closer, establish an affectionate bonding between us and others, which naturally lead us to be able to bring forth loving kindness and compassion. Then what is on the other end? After all, there's 7 points that I need to cover. On the other end is the more we feel love and compassion, the more we care and we show concern for those closest to us. Very naturally, we will notice in our own mind and heart that we feel a sense of, we naturally take upon ourselves this responsibility, that I want you to be happy and to not suffer. And we don't actually see it as a burden. Instead, we see it as a natural extension of that loving kindness and compassion that we feel responsible and we want to do what we can, to ensure that this person is happy, the one that we love is happy, or to help them avoid suffering, to ease their pain. Yeah. So this is a sense of concern, widening the circle of concern and responsibility beyond oneself. Let's say starting off, we are quite self-centered and selfish, so we naturally care about my happiness and my suffering. So there is this central concern or central responsibility. But as we come to care and love another person, that circle of concern widen to include that person. So my inner circle of concern now has more than one person. So, and of course in life, we have, hopefully that we have a few more other people in this inner circle of concern where, we naturally have this sense of care, concern, and responsibility towards their happiness and suffering. Not that we can necessarily make them happy, but we do try our best to promote their happiness and to help them to be free from suffering. So this is the next step after love and compassion. In the traditional setting, in fact, His Holiness the Dalai Lama coined a term for this. In the traditional presentation, this is called universal responsibility. You can think of it as a widening scope of responsibility. Yeah. And beyond the sense of increasing responsibility, widening scope of concern, comes the result, sevenfold cause and effect method. So the first 6 are causes, and the 7th is the effect. And here the effect is this natural altruistic motivation. They say, oh, since I have this sense of concern and responsibility towards others, those that I care, those that I love, then it's very natural for us to have this motivation, this altruistic motivation. Altruistic here used in a more limited sense. Doesn't necessarily include all sentiments. In this first, what I'm talking about at this moment, the altruistic motivation is to include others and to say that, oh, I'm going to do what I can, to bring them happiness and to free them from suffering. Right? So I hope this progression from relatedness through reciprocal interaction, the receiving and the giving, love, compassion, widening circle of concern or responsibility, and culminating in this altruistic motivation. I hope it makes some sense that this method is not been unreasonable. That even at our own level, at the place where we now are, with the amount of love and compassion we can bring forth, that we can see that there is that these 7 points are quite reasonable, and there is this sense of progression. The more we are able to strengthen the preconditions and extend it to more people, the stronger will be our response of loving kindness and compassion, and the more natural it is for us to experience the sense of growing concern and responsibility, and to bring forth the altruistic motivation. All right, so this is my so-called lower standard version. All right, so I like to call it lower standard because I think in Buddhist studies and practice, we all have very high ideal, enlightenment. We like to aspire very high, and therefore we also set our expectation very high. We set our standard very high. It's almost as if anything lower than that is not worth talking about. But I think it's important to talk about the low standard, the one that is very close to where we are now at, maybe just a little bit better than where we are now at, because I find so much more encouraging and empowering to be able to set this lower standard. Lower standard doesn't mean no standard, right? It's just a little bit better than where I'm now at, and aspire to that, towards that, and to be able to accomplish it, which is very uplifting. Say, wow, I can do it. I can see myself improving, changing for the better. I can see the positive changes in my own experience, which is a way of verifying the truth of the teaching in our own experience. And then you can raise the bar. Then you can raise a little bit higher, then you can aspire higher and raise a little bit higher. Before you know, you arrive at that high standard. Yeah. That is my current strategy. Because the other way around is to start with a very high standard. And of course, you're doomed to fail because it's simply almost impossible. We are here and the standard is way there. You can struggle and struggle. And at least for the next few decades, you are not going to come anywhere near there. So you will be met with disappointment. You will fail to live up to your expectation and your high ideal. And so the whole exercise becomes one of how badly you can beat yourself up, how badly you can sort of put yourself down because you have just a constant failure. And that is, I think, quite unfortunate. We all have we can aspire for a high standard. What is this high standard? A form of perfection. Yes, of course, a high standard is always our ideal, our idea of perfection. I'm not so sure whether some of those ideas we hold in our mind about perfection is really achievable or not. So, being a pessimist, I decided let's start low. Just a little bit, all the small steps of improvement, and eventually we might surprise ourselves to see where we finally arrive at. And so let me just now look at the high standard one, the one that is presented in the classic text, which is what we are encouraged, especially within Tibetan Buddhism, what we call Mahayana Buddhism. We are all encouraged to aspire towards. So the main difference is the scope. When we start from where we are, the scope of loving kindness or compassion is necessarily limited. And this is a very natural thing, I think. When we talk about what is the biological love and compassion that we are somehow part of our birthright, that love and compassion is necessarily limited in scope. I mean, after all, that is usually the experience of most human beings on Earth, except for a few exceptions. Most of us are naturally only concerned with a small number of people, and maybe if we don't deliberately train it, and we probably can only manage to that extent. And the teaching is trying to expand the scope and greatly expand the scope to include all sentiments. Now, the word all is very important, right? And it has great significance. The all is literally all sentiments, no exception allowed, right? Because most of the time when we encounter this teaching, we get into the habit of wishing, oh, may all sentiments be happy, may all sentiments this, may all sentiments be that. We say it so often that we might not pick up on its true significance, no exception. Because what we are actually saying is, may all sentiments be happy, except that idiot, that irritating person, and this one, you don't even need to consider, is completely unacceptable, and so on and so forth. We have many, many exceptions, which in other words means our all sentiments is sort of like a bit like a lie, because it's not true. We are not ready to include everyone. Of course, we aspire towards that. So the classic teaching is really geared towards working on the conditions that enable us to eventually be able to open our hearts and to include everyone. So let's look at it from beginning to the end. So in terms of relatedness, the very first condition, now we must find a way to feel related to every sentient being. And a lot of those sentiments we will never meet face to face in this life. We will not know who they are. Just even humans, just you will limit. We don't know who they are. We don't know their names. We don't know anything about their lives. We will never meet them. No. So how am I going to feel related to them? So that is a major challenge. And so the method that this method set upon to invite us to think of all sentiments, each and every one of them, those that we encounter and those that we may never encounter, to see each one of them as having been our mothers. So we are invoking a very specific human relationship, the mother-child relationship, and on the basis of the Buddhist belief in rebirth, multiple rebirth, to put forth this proposition, this statement: see every sentiment, though that you have encountered or not, to regard each one of them as having been one's mother. No, definitely not everyone in this life, but in one of the past life. And therefore, from that point of view, we can assert that, yes, I'm related to every one of them, because somewhere in those many, many past lives in my past, each one of the sentiments has been my mother. And in fact, they even say that not only once, but many times. This is no doubt one of the most difficult topics to realize in the teaching of Lamrim, the stages of the path. And I mean, it's easy to intellectually think about it, and you might even accept it intellectually, but it's really, really hard to feel it, to kind of be convinced about it and to really feel it. That is difficult. Right? But nonetheless, this is how we try to build and have this sense of relatedness to all sentiments. So that's the first condition. Then, in terms of reciprocal interaction, we must find a way, to be able to have that kind of reciprocal interaction, or to recall. Because after all, we never met most of them. How are we going to have any interactions? So the teaching will suggest that we remember, just as we try to see them as having been our mothers. Then when we have that mother-child relationship, we must have lots of interactions. We must have received a lot of kindness from our mothers, present and past. And that is what we are asked to extrapolate from our experience in this life with our mother of this life, and extrapolate that to all other mothers that we have in the past. Right? I hope that reasoning makes sense. And therefore, the second point is called remembering the kindness of our mothers. Right? And then the third point is naturally, just as in this life, when I remember the love and kindness of my mother, I also have this wish to repay that kindness. And on various occasions, I managed to do a small part of it, able to help my mothers or do something that will make her happy, and so on and so forth. So there is that the giving part. There's a receiving part and there's a giving part in my relationship with my mother. And likewise, with all sentiments, the third point is to generate this and think about this wish of repaying the kindness of my mothers. Right? And that leads us to the fourth point, which is, of course, generate loving kindness for all sentient beings, and in relation to their happiness, wishing them to find happiness, and in relation to their suffering, to have compassion, that may all sentient beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And once you are able to accomplish these two, then the next one is easy. As we strengthen loving kindness and compassion for all sentient beings, naturally, just as what I explained earlier, there is a growing sense of concern. We have now included all sentient beings in the circle of concern, and there is a growing sense of feeling, taking upon this sense responsibility for their happiness and suffering. And this is what the Dalai Lama called universal responsibility, or sometimes called the superior intention. Just different names for this sense of taking on willingly, not as a burden, but taking on this responsibility, feeling that, I ought to be able to do something. I want to do something for them. Yeah. And that culminates in the true altruistic motivation in this context, which is to generate this wish, these aspirations that I want to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. I want to accomplish the welfare of all sentient beings. And how to do that in the Buddhist context? The best way is, of course, for me, myself, to achieve the state of enlightenment. Then and only then I will be in the best position to benefit all sentient beings. Right? So when you put all these ideas together, these two so-called aspirations together, the aspiration to benefit all my mother's sentient beings, and to aspire to achieve enlightenment in order to do so. You put them together, and this is bodhicitta. This is the altruistic motivation that we talk a lot about in Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, there's a lot of explanation this evening. So feel free to give me your comments or questions if you have any in the live chat. But before I continue talking on, I thought maybe it might be good now to do some meditation, just to familiarize ourselves with some of the points and to have some of our own experience to go by for us to gauge, how valid this whole presentation is, whether it is something doable or is this plain wow imagination. Yeah. Last week we meditated on loving kindness by reflecting first on the relatedness, how we are related to, how we can relate to others on the basis of that commonality that we all share, that we want to be happy and we do not want to suffer. So today we will do something similar. We start by again reminding ourselves that I'm very similar to this other person. We can choose whoever it is. It can be someone close to us, someone distant to us. That even though in many ways we are different, but nonetheless, me and others both share in the same fundamental desire and wish to be happy and to not suffer. And sometimes just by thinking on that point, at least for myself, I think it's enough for me to be able to have empathy and to be able to kind of imagine my way into why this person behaved in such a way, and kind of be able to understand their choices and their behavior, their actions, and in so doing be able to relate to them. Even though many times I might disagree with them. I don't have the same preferences as them. I will not make the same choices as them. I will not behave in the same way as them. I definitely may not define happiness the same way as them. Maybe their happiness is absolute suffering for me, and my happiness is absolute suffering for them. Yeah. But for example, lately I've been telling people I'm really enjoying this self-isolation, this whole experience. I'm finding it fantastic. I really enjoy it, and I know there are other people with faced with this lockdown. It's not such a pleasant experiences. So we can be very different in how we respond to situation, and we can acknowledge those differences, and yet at the same time not allow those differences to separate us. That we can still relate to this person from this fundamental point. Now, having reflect on that, I'm going to invite you to extend this time compassion towards others, their share of suffering, share of problems and challenges and difficulties, as well as the causes of those suffering, and to see whether it makes a difference. Even for people really close to us, our loved ones, our families, our friends, so on and so forth, those that we love and we show concern towards, just by reflecting on this fundamental point that me and this friend of mine, already we are close, but now we think I'm just like him. He or she is just like me. We are all trying to be happy. We don't want to suffer. And we can even see it manifest in our personality, in our behavior, in our choices. And hopefully that actually bring us closer together. We can, we are already close, and we can be even closer together. At least we can really empathize with them. We can really see things from their point of view as their way of finding happiness, their way of avoiding suffering. And on that basis, to invoke compassion, and wish, may you be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Or I use a different set of phrases. May you be free from pain and sorrow. May you find healing. May you find peace. And as we say that, and maybe sometimes things that we know about our friend, our loved ones come to mind, especially their share of suffering. When that comes to mind, see if we can, as we become aware of that, respond with even more compassion, by repeating slowly and mindfully those phrases of compassion. Right, so let's do a meditation together, and just once again explore some of these conditions or points I mentioned in the sevenfold cause and effect method for cultivating kindness, compassion, and altruistic motivation. So I invite you to settle back on a comfortable position, posture, meditation posture, and I'll just ring this bell to signal the start of the meditation. So usually in all the meditation I do, I like to take a few minutes at the beginning, not to rush straight into the meditation, but to take care that we also create favorable conditions that enable us to really settle deeply into our meditation practice. So we start with the posture. Having adopted a particular posture, make sure that the posture feels comfortable and does not introduce unnecessary pain into our body as much as possible. We try to keep our back upright in a natural way if we are sitting. And by that I mean we don't have to tense up our back muscles in some deliberate attempt to straighten the back. So just move your upper body around. Just allow the body to find a position where it is most comfortable, most at ease, and come most naturally to it. And that is good enough. Rest our hands and arms on some kind of physical support so that we don't have to contract or tighten our shoulder muscles, arm muscles to hold them up in some special way. Usually, as far as eyes are concerned, feel free to close them completely or leave them open or anything in between, and that is perfectly fine. Let's take a few moments and just allow the body to adjust, to find its way, and to settle down comfortably into our meditation posture. I find it very helpful to take some time to help the body and mind to shift gears, to make that transition into meditation. And I usually do it by way of reconnecting the body and mind, returning attention to be in touch with our own body, to be in touch with the bodily sensations. And no great effort is needed, just a light touch, just to awaken the mind, to reconnect with the different simple sensations at different parts of the body. So I invite you to rest the attention, starting at the crown, the topmost part of the body, and just move slowly, but no need to be too slow, just a light touch, so that you notice first sensations at the crown, simple sensations, tingling, slight feeling of pressure, could be warmth or coolness, could be some vibrations, or maybe nothing at all. And then from the crown, moving downwards, rest our attention at the face, tune in and notice sensations at the face, especially notice whether have we unconsciously contract and tighten any of the muscles of the face. Quite often such contractions are unnecessary, and so see if we can, given that we have more control over our facial muscles, see if we can persuade our own face to relax a bit more, to let go of those tension and contraction, and to let in a feeling of softness, of relaxation and comfort into our own face. Moving down, feel free to move at your own pace. Lightly touch with your attention the throat, the neck, and also check in on the shoulders. Notice sensation in this part of the body. We acknowledge if there is any unpleasant feelings or discomfort due to tension in this part of the body, which is quite common. We acknowledge those unpleasant feelings and just let them be. Let them be here for the moment. Don't feel that we must always try to relax them. The attention continue down both arms at the same time, sweeping, noticing, sensing as we go, sensations starting from the shoulder joints, down the arms, passing the elbows, and eventually arriving in both hands. Become aware along the way those simple bodily sensations. And now that we are aware of both arms, see if we can give permission to rest the weight of both arms comfortably on their support. returning our attention to the chest, and throughout the meditation, we will find that we have to invite our attention to come back here and now to our meditation again and again. At the chest, we take note of sensations here, maybe sensations associated with breathing. Maybe we can sense the beating of the heart. Notice the sensations at our upper back. And then when we feel ready, moving downwards, deeper, notice sensations at the abdomen. Take note not only of sensations at the surface, at the skin level, but maybe much deeper within. We note not only the sensation at the front of the body or inside the body, but also at the back of the body. And continue down into the pelvis, taking note of sensations here, the weight of the pelvis resting comfortably on the seat. And then moving down both legs at the same time, noting the sensations in both legs. Once again, very simple bodily sensations, nothing spectacular, until we arrive at both feet, such that we are aware of sensations coming through the soles of the feet, at the top of the feet, sensation in the toes. Having briefly surveyed the body, reconnecting attention, the mind with the body, we allow the body to settle into the posture, to continue at its own pace, the unwinding, the loosening up, the letting go of unnecessary tensions. And we allow the mind, the attention, to enjoy any pleasant feelings, however subtle they may be, pleasant feelings that arise as we release tensions, release tightness. And whenever we feel quite settled into meditation, we can turn our attention to the cultivation of compassion by first gathering the condition of relatedness. To bring someone close to you to mind, family members, a friend, a loved one, someone that you already feel quite close to and you know him or her fairly well. Bring such a person to mind. Maybe picture this person in your mind's eye, or imagine recollecting a recent encounter with this person. And as you see this person in your own mind, see if you can reflect a little bit on the precondition of relatedness, how we and this person are closely related on the basis that we share the same natural wish and desire to be happy and to not suffer. See if you can find evidence in this person's behavior, choices, this person's experiences and expressions, that he or she is just like me, wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer. To see if we can really relate to this person, to empathize with this person on that basis, on that single condition. Coming back to the meditation, focusing on someone close to you. Often we hear ourselves say that we don't understand another person. We don't understand their actions. We don't understand their choices, which often is a code word to say that we disagree with their choices, disagree with their actions. And maybe now, in the light of this reflection, that they are just like me, trying our best to be happy and to not suffer. We may define happiness differently, and we define suffering differently, and we set upon different methods to achieving our goals. And precisely because of this, we can actually understand them, even if we disagree with them. We can understand why, from their point of view, they make those choices, they act in those ways, they feel what they feel, and they react in the way they react. And when you feel ready, when you feel that you have reflected sufficiently, let's see if we can call forth our natural compassion for this person. Wishing, expressing through a few simple phrases. You can start with those I'm using and change them as you go along. Wishing, may you be free from pain and sorrow. May you find healing. May you find peace. May you be free from pain and sorrow. May you find healing. May you find peace. So feel free to alternate between reflection and extending compassion through the use of phrases, a few simple phrases. And feel free to stay as long or as short as you like with one person. And when you feel ready, you can also shift your attention to yet another person within your inner circle of concern. And repeat the same process, reflecting on our commonality, the sense of relatedness to one another, and then to express compassion. May you be free from pain and sorrow. May you find healing. May you find peace. So coming back to the meditation, refocus on the people closest to us, and with each one of them, taking our time to reflect on the sense of relatedness. That not only are we able to relate to this other person in many ways, but there is also one commonality we share with each and every sentient being, that we all wish to be happy and to not suffer. Is it possible on the basis of such understanding to be able to extend compassion to others? May you be free from pain and sorrow. May you find healing. May you find peace. So I hope we are able to notice in our own meditation experience. I mean, don't have to agree with what I said, but hopefully you can notice maybe that's makes some difference when we are able to relate to another person on the basis of seeing the commonality between us as one of sincerely trying to be happy, trying our best to be happy, trying our best to not suffer. That it create a lot of opportunity for us to empathize with one another, to be able to kind of better understand, even though we may not agree, we may not make the same choices, and therefore find it that much easier to open our hearts and to respond with compassion and kindness. So I would like to go back and now to look at the classic presentation of Sevenfold Cause and Effect and highlight a few points which you might want to consider and think about. The way I present it, presenting these two so-called two presentation. One is the low standard, my low standard version, and one is the so-called high standard. It's not because I try to create a kind of duality, or putting that one against the other. But I find that I feel that it's really important to make this method work. Is to not leave it as a theoretical presentation, but instead try to actualize at least some aspect of it, to be able to bring forth our own feelings, and to have a real response coming forth from our own heart. the more as we try on, the more we are able to witness for ourselves how we respond and how you have helped us to change, hopefully in the positive direction. The more it helps us to be more open to take on and to work on the classic presentation by slowly, bit by bit, widening the circle of concerns, to feel that I can now include more, at our own pace, at a pace that we are comfortable with, and yet at the same time feel that actually the whole thing is quite doable. Of course, we are not going to perfect it within one day or in a short time, but it is not something unrealistic, not something that only special people out there can do it, especially people that look completely different from me, and especially, they shave their hair, they wrap their some with red pieces of cloth, and they sit on thrones and so on and so forth. Only those special people can do it, not me. That would be a terrible conclusion. Because the teaching is really directed at each one of us to help us to find a way for us to develop loving kindness and compassion, and to work towards genuinely generate that altruistic motivation. And I feel that the best way to approach it is to find a way to enable us to start where we are and then work our way up. But having said that, let's look at a little bit of the challenges when we try to apply it to all sentient beings. Starting from the first one, seeing all sentient beings as one's mothers. I personally find this really difficult. Traditionally, this hinges on some kind of logical reasoning. First of all, the idea within Buddhism, the acceptance of multiple past lives. The Buddha ever said that a beginning cannot be seen to cyclic existence, to our predicament of caught up in this multiple rebirth again and again. So the fact that there is no beginning implied this thing seems to have gone on for infinite amount of time, and the reasoning go in those many lifetimes, not all of them. Of which are human rebirth, because Buddhism does accept rebirth in different realms of existence. But if you just focus on among those that are human rebirths, and since there are infinite past life, that is also a huge number. And in each of those human rebirths, we will have a mother, right? Which makes sense, all right? So if you gather up all those mothers, there will be a lot of them. And so the reasoning goes, since we have a lot of mothers in the past life, might it not be possible that somehow we manage, so to speak, lucky that each and every sentiment at any one point of time has been my mother. Well, there's a possibility. I usually think of it as I will entertain the possibility. So that is a classic reasoning behind why we can. But you probably, when you try it out, you probably think that maybe you can accept the reasoning, but on an emotional level, it is quite a big stretch to then feel the same way towards sentiments, each sentiment, as the way we feel towards our own mother. Presenting this topic, this particular point in a modern setting, bring up like a can of worms, because in our modern world we are much more. I think we are much more willing to communicate, to raise our difficulties that we experience with our parents, whereas maybe in the past we are more likely to hide it at the back. I'm sure a parent-child relationship has not always been. It's not as if it's very good in the past and it's only difficult in the modern times. I think it has always been difficult in its own way. But it's just that in the old days, they are less likely to talk about it in the open. And whereas nowadays, we are more likely to just to express it, to express the challenge. Not all parents ideal parents, and many people have a hard time with their parents. And so this teaching of asking us to see all sentiments as our mothers, can be very difficult if we have a difficult relationship with our mother. So what to do in that context? Personally, my thinking is it doesn't have to be our mothers. It's not like there's something. I mean, of course, the mother-child relationship is very special, but for the purpose of the reflection, it's not necessary to stick to mothers. We are related to others in all sorts of ways, as fathers, as brothers, as sisters, as friends, and also, of course, the opposite as enemies as well. The same reasoning applied to every one of those roles. So it could be possible to think of others in the role that we have better feelings towards. Yeah. So that is my reasoning. I have heard of a different explanation saying that since the mother is such an important person in our life, that even if we have a difficult relationship with her in this life, all the more we need to work on it and somehow find some kind of resolution to that, and therefore apply that to all sentiments. So there's another approach to it. Yeah. But nonetheless, it is a difficult point to wrap our head around, and on top of that, to actually allow us to feel. The most important is the feeling, not so much to see, but to feel that this person has been my mother. Many years ago, I came across a different story from someone relating. I can't remember that source, but that story gave me another possibilities. And the author, I think she was visiting Dharamsala, and which is where His Holiness the Dalai Lama resides in India, and she was walking around Dharamsala, Macau Branch, somewhere around there, and she saw this elderly Tibetan lady, carrying a heavy burden on the back, and just walking across her, and the author has a flash of insight in that moment, that this lady in front of her, this elder lady in front of her, that she of course she didn't know who the person is. It's just that the fact that she saw this person, she has this sense that could very well be my mother, could very well be my mother. It's almost like she can imagine her mother in a position, or this person could very well be her mother. And she had this feeling of closeness to this woman that she didn't talk to. She just saw this woman walking past her, and yet she has this feeling, she has this thought, and also along with the thought, there is an emotional response towards that person. And when I read about this, I thought, oh, maybe I don't have to insist, that I must see each sentiment as my mother, as if for sure they must have been my mother. Maybe it's also good enough to consider the possibility that what happened if this person has been my mother, or what happened if I regard this person as my mother. Just that possibility that maybe, or the fact that willingness to suspend, to extend my imagination and to just imagine this person as my mother, without stating that it is the truth, the fact, but just to consider that possibility. Might that not be good enough? And for me, I think it does work. Sometimes when we encounter someone, we can, like a stranger to us, not related to us in any way that we know, but we can imagine that this person could very well be my brother, my father, my mother, or someone in my life. Yeah. And if I am able to go along with that imagination, I'm quite possible for me to feel a sense of relatedness. The person is not so distant anymore. Somehow the distance between me and that person is shortened. And on the basis of that, if we have conversations, we have some more interaction, maybe it's even easier for me to feel that, yes, I can see this person as if he or she has been my mother, or my father, or my relative, or my close friends, or whatever. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's yet another way of interpreting this first point and allow us to develop an ever-increasing sense of able to relate to each and every sentiment in that way. Okay. And the second point, of course, is to remember the kindness of our mothers on the basis of remembering the kindness we receive in this life from our own mother of this life. That again, of course, you can imagine that can be challenging. Not all mothers are that necessarily that kind, and some of us, unfortunately, we find that when we recollect the other actions of our mother, not necessarily the kindness. Because our mothers are just like us, human beings, not perfect. Have our own challenges and have their own challenges, their flaws, also good qualities. And sometimes in relationship, unfortunately, the good qualities didn't manifest, but the flaws manifest themselves. And we have been hurt and we can still be harmed. So again, this is another sticky point in this presentation. First of all, is how to see all sentiment as a mothers, and secondly, how to remember the kindness of all mothers on the basis of remembering the kindness of our own mother. Yeah. On the other end of the scale, which is beyond loving kindness and compassion, we are asked to cultivate universal responsibility. Now, this is also a bit difficult. Universal responsibility means taking upon ourselves the sense of responsibility that I myself, not leaving it to others, I myself, I'm going to take on the responsibility to help my own mothers. If I don't help them, who else will help them? So that's how the reasoning goes. Having seen them as our mother, recognize them as one's own mothers, and cultivate loving kindness and compassion towards them, towards their situation. Of course, it ought to be me, their child, who are responsible for helping them find happiness, helping them to be free of suffering. That is universal responsibility. Now, on paper, it sounds quite all right, but in real life situation, there is a gap between loving kindness and compassion for all sentiments and this taking on the universal responsibility to working for them. If you don't think about it, it's fine. It's all right, this and that and that. But if you really think about it, you might find that it's not so easy to sincerely feel it within ourselves, or to not feel overwhelmed by the thought of it. The thought can be quite scary, especially when some of our mother sentiments are particularly difficult to deal with. Even we find that, I don't think I can deal with them. But sometimes we feel the same towards our family members, towards even people very close to us. We get fed up with them, we get upset with them, get irritated by them. And we just, sometimes we give up. We just feel that there's nothing I can do to this person. It's so stubborn, so whatever, so set in their ways and so on and so forth. Yeah. We can get discouraged. We can feel like we want to give up because it's so hard, it's so difficult. So universal responsibility is maybe easy on paper, but very difficult it's understandably difficult to take it up. And it is very easy to be discouraged by the behavior of others and so on and so forth. Discouragement and leading to the thought of wishing to give up is the major obstacles to the generation of altruistic intention to bodhicitta. In Mahayana discourses, the records of the Buddha's teaching, as part of Mahayana Buddhism, this is often raised as a point to look out for and to prevent feeling discouraged in the face of the tremendous challenges and difficulty of actualizing that bodhicitta, that altruistic intention, taking on that universal responsibility to work for the welfare of all sentient beings. You just listen to the words. It's kind of a bit shocking, isn't it? No, I'm not sure even I am ready to take on responsibility for my own life. No, even that I feel is a burden, let alone the happiness and the suffering of all sentient beings. I mean, it's quite mind-boggling, if you really think about it. But nonetheless, the teaching say that true enough, on first encounter and even subsequent encounter, it is still a difficult thing to wrap our head around, wrap our mind around. But nonetheless, in the teaching, they often emphasize everything becomes easier upon familiarizing. The more familiar you are with something through repetition and through repeated encounters and through that familiarization, things do become easier and easier until finally it's just a piece of cake. We just do it and we don't even think about it, because we have become so familiar with it, and it sort of arises as second nature to us. So that is the example that the teaching point us to. Maybe at this point of time, on encountering an idea like universal responsibility, or what is something called infinite altruism, altruistic intention encompassing all sentient beings, is something unthinkable, and definitely we don't feel capable of doing it. Then we can acknowledge that might be how we feel now, but not to give up on ourselves, not to give up on this idea, but and not to feel discouraged by it, and to think that it's okay. We can do it step by step, small step by a small step, and the more we are slowly familiarizing ourselves with the idea, the easier it will be. And the more familiar it is to us, then the easier it is for us for it to arise. And given time, we might find that, and also the growth of our ability, our knowledge, our qualities of loving kindness and compassion, as that increase in strength, eventually one day will arrive at a point where it is actually doable. It is something we feel quite very possible, and that we can easily fulfill and take it up. So therefore, we may not feel that now, but that doesn't mean that further down the track we will not feel differently. So it's very important to make certain adjustments for it, to not make demand now, or to not have expectation now that are not realistic. So we have to adjust our expectation. Where we are now, we start with the corresponding low standard, but we look towards a higher standard, a higher ideal, and we work our way there. Bit by bit, we raise our standard, we achieve it, we raise our standard, we achieve it. And eventually we will arrive at a place where previously we may think that it is totally impossible. Okay, so this in relation to the other end, universal responsibility, that some of the obstacles and difficulties might come forth. Why do we even want to put ourselves through all this trouble, cultivating such attitude of infinite altruism? We have nothing better to do with our life. Why do we want to put ourselves through all this trouble? Are you sure we really need to do this? Maybe I just opt for something easier, and get it done and be done with. And so that is also another relevant question. Why do I even want to cultivate bodhicitta? Even want to give rise to such altruistic motivation? Could I not settle for something less, something easier, not so difficult, and maybe that is good enough? Personally, that is not the teaching. Personally, I think there is no reason why. There's no no absolute law that dictate that each one of us must do this. Yeah. But nonetheless, in the teaching, we are encouraged to consider this, and it is put forth as fulfilling our potential, that we have this potential. Do you think a musician or artist's work cultivate bodhicitta? Okay, I'll answer that later. Let me finish this point. That why would we even want to consider developing such infinite altruism, given that it's really not an easy thing to develop? And I'm saying, from my point of view, sure, there is no compulsion, no absolute reason why we must develop it. But the teaching encourages us to consider that this is our developing our full potential. Bodhicitta is, of course, the doorway to attainment of Buddhahood, to become a Buddha, especially in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. To become a Buddha, what differentiates a Buddha from any other people is the Buddha is someone who first generates bodhicitta, this fantastic altruistic motivation to wishing to work for all sentient beings, and along the way accumulate the causes and eventually achieve the state of enlightenment, the state of fully enlightened being, of fully awakened being of a Buddha. So if we find the life stories of the Buddha hugely inspiring, and we want to follow in his footsteps, follow in his example, then this is the bodhicitta, marks the beginning of his so-called career path, or the beginning of his spiritual journey. And each and every Buddha, according to the teaching, has to go through this. Start off with bodhicitta, and then through cultivating the causes for enlightenment, eventually achieve the state of Buddhahood. So it's almost like a prerequisite requirement to be a Buddha. And so it is important to consider it, at least reflect and consider it, not to judge ourselves on the basis of our current abilities, our current experiences, but instead look to our potential, that we have the potential in the future to be just like the Buddha, to become the Buddha. And along the way, what is needed for us is, and what actually differentiates the Buddha from others, is this marvelous bodhicitta, this the great love and great compassion, and this sense of universal responsibility to culminate in this mind and heart, the good heart of infinite altruism. Now, the last created this question about what about artists and musicians? Do they cultivate bodhicitta? What about people who engage in philanthropy? Really benefiting people, trying to elevate poverty, trying to make a better world to live in for everyone. Do they have bodhicitta? So this is an important distinction. First of all, we can say that anyone who do good out of kindness and compassion, and there are many people, which is a wonderful thing. We all embodied a certain amount of altruism, natural altruism, thinking beyond ourselves, including others in the circle of our concern, taking on a varying degree, different degree of responsibility, working not just for our own happiness, but also for the happiness of others. Not only family and close ones, but also people who are strangers, just out of the goodness of heart. So those are, in general, we can say altruistic behavior, altruistic motivation. But bodhicitta, as I just now explained, is an unusual form of altruism. Right? It has two parts to it. One part is the common one, aspiring to benefit sentient beings, all sentient beings. And this one we can relate to. We may not extend it to all sentient beings, but we definitely can think of benefiting more sentient beings. Right? So this is the one aspect of bodhicitta, aspiration to work for the welfare of all sentient beings. Now, what is missing from most other people And what differentiates bodhicitta from other forms of altruism is the second part, right? Someone who has a passion for music and to see music as something that is healing to the world, and through creating music in different form and disseminating them, sharing music to try to make a better world, has a very altruistic motivation, and they try to accomplish it through their gift of music, right? So, which is a wonderful thing, but that is not bodhicitta, because the second aspiration, in this case, for this person is through giving music, and many people would appreciate that, because many music lovers who really appreciate such passion and such generosity. But in this context of Buddhism, now that second aspiration is different from from that of bodhicitta. In bodhicitta, the second aspiration, how to do it, how to free all sentient beings from suffering, how to bring them to happiness, is a very different idea. And this is the one that we tend not to notice. Now that aspiration is aspiration to attain enlightenment, to become a Buddha, in order to fulfill this wish, in order to benefit sentient beings. It's a very specific aspiration, a very specific goal, to become a Buddha, to become enlightened. Right? And so the means to benefit sentient beings is not through music, it's not through arts, it's not through donation, giving, and other ways. Other ways. It's very specific. It's through attainment, striving and the attainment of full and complete enlightenment or awakening of a Buddha. Now, this is a bit unusual, right? First of all, you must know about this possibility, know what is enlightenment, and have some understanding what it is, and find it really attractive, and to see that it is possible, and that there is and through achieving enlightenment that you are actually able to benefit sentient beings. You have to know all this before you can even give rise to the thought, the aspiration. Oh, I'm going to become a Buddha, not for my own sake, but precisely because I want to be of benefit to all sentient beings. I want to work for the welfare of all sentient beings. Now that is very more rare, so to speak. And this and only this would qualify as bodhicitta. So other form of altruistic intention and behavior exists, which is wonderful, but we cannot call those bodhicitta, because especially the second aspiration are quite often nothing to do with enlightenment, right? Nothing to do with achieving the state of Buddhahood. And because of that, it's not qualified to be called bodhicitta. You can qualify to call altruism, but not bodhicitta. As the name implies, bodhi-citta. Bodhi means awakening, enlightenment. Citta is the mind and heart. Although it's sort of like a contraction, it means the mind and heart that aspire to the state of bodhi, the state of awakening, not for our own sake, but for the sake of all sentient beings. Right? So as the name implies, the name points to a very specific set of aspiration, a very specific mind state, so to speak. One of aspiring to be enlightened in order to work for the welfare of all sentient beings. All right, and this is a lot harder to find, so to speak. So I hope that clarified the difference between altruism in general, which many people has. Many people has the goodness of heart that is expressed in many different ways in our daily life, and to contrast that altruism with the very specific altruism that we talk about in this context of bodhicitta. That doesn't mean that other form of altruism is somehow no good. No, nonetheless, altruism itself comes out of kindness of heart, compassion of heart. And it's just that the method we go about wanting to actualize that kindness and compassion are very different. Some choose to do it through music, through offering music, through offering arts. Others choose to do it through volunteering their skill, their time, their energy, through giving, giving material, giving resources, and so forth, giving money. So there are many different ways, and bodhicitta is one, an unusual way. Instead of focusing on eliminating poverty, overcoming racism, inequality, and so on and so forth, we focus on achieving enlightenment, and from the state of enlightenment to work for the benefit of others. Right? Whether is it worth accomplishing, is it what you intend to do with your life, or it probably take a few lifetimes. That's something we need to reflect and think about for ourselves. So I hope I have not confused the thing, but I have somehow, I hope I present the sevenfold cause and effect method for generating bodhicitta in a sufficiently clear way to give you some idea, and that I again emphasize, precisely because this classic presentation is so hard, because the first point, seeing all sentiment as mothers, at least for myself, is still difficult these days. I find that should not be an obstacle for us to take the ideas, as how I presented my low standard version, to immediately apply it in our practice, in our daily life, and to be able to verify for ourselves in our own experience that this presentation, sevenfold cause and effect method, is it works. It really works. It really have able to generate positive effects. Definitely, if we work within a more limited scope of ourselves and the few people in our so-called inner circle of concern. Okay, enough of me talking. Thank you very much for your attention, and wish you have a good week ahead, and see you next week as we continue on the good hearts. All right, good night, everybody.